The basic matter is this. You should not throw people in jail for using drugs. It's immoral and it's wrong. If it's so dangerous, marijuana, then why are we punishing people for using it? Why aren't we instead getting people help? Our logic in the drug war is this. We should punish people for using substances that can hurt them. We cannot punish people for using health choices because they own their own bodies. If we own nothing, we own our own flesh and blood. It would be like if we went to Burger King and rounded up all the obese customers to keep them from hurting themselves. Mr. Wickler, who came up before in his parley, said we have 5% of the world's, 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. Most of that population are nonviolent substance abusers, economically disfranchised, or people of color. This is literally modern slavery. This has literally been called the new Jim Crow. This is literally the difference between a kid getting federal funding to go to college. This is sick. This is going way beyond, let's just get high. This is going way beyond smoking weed. This is honestly a human rights issue. You don't have to smoke weed to support HB492. You really don't even have to like weed to support HB492. But you do have to have an inkling of compassion. You do have to have a love for civil rights to support HB492. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tricia Lucas. Tricia Lucas. You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Tricia Lucas, and I'm the Advocacy Director at New Futures. New Futures is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to reduce alcohol and other drug problems in the state through advocacy, education, and collaboration. And New Futures is opposed to this bill and the other two. And what I would like to do with the time that I have is to say that our opposition and the value that we bring to this discussion is that we do the research, we have the information, and can provide that to you. Some of that is in the written testimony that I have, and some of that is in some papers akin to what have been given to you elsewhere. I'm very fortunate that Chief Goldstein preceded me because he cited some of the studies that give you a sense of the research that's available. And so you guys have a very challenging discussion here. But I think what makes it harder is when people say, on one side or the other, there's no merit to the studies or the arguments. We oppose these three bills because our research, detailed and comprehensive, of evidence-based documents and peer-reviewed materials, is that this is a harmful substance and that legalization of it will decrease the price and increase access. And what I'd like to do is highlight a couple of facts that you haven't heard before and respond to one bit of information that was given, which I think is erroneous. With regard to the access issue, there was a RAND study that was done in 2010 when they were attempting to model the impact of legalization in Prop 10, or Prop 19 in California. And their determination with no equivocation was that if you legalize a substance, you will reduce its price because the cost of its prohibited status raises the price. If the price of the substance decreases, it will be more, there will be greater consumption of that good. We also know that if you have greater access to that product, you will also have greater use of that product. So I wanted to share with you that study and that information. The second issue that I would like to highlight is the issue of revenue. Again, this bill provides for a 15% tax at the point of sale from the cultivation facility to wherever it's going next. I have no way to predict the amount of revenue. What I can tell you is that whatever that revenue is, it will not be nearly enough to address the problems that are created by marijuana consumption in this state. So you will raise revenue. Will it be enough? No. Do we adequately fund alcohol and other drug treatment in this state? We do not. I don't see that changing. Harm. The issue that was raised earlier in one of the people who testified was that there is no evidence that this affects cognitive functioning. There is a 2012 study that followed youth from the time of their teenage years through their late 30s that demonstrated that there is a significant impact on cognitive functioning measured in loss of IQ points, that impairment does not go away when you stop using it, and in fact is still present as an adult. So the notion that this is not a substance that affects brain development and has an impact on cognitive functioning is inaccurate. And then the final observation that I would like to make is there was a question about financial aid. And it's interesting because Representative Ginsburg, I remember talking to you about that a year ago on the bill. There was a provision in the Federal Higher Education Act, it was put in 1998, that puts very significant burdens on people. Those provisions have been amended in 2006 and again in 2009, and there have been efforts to completely eliminate them. But the reality of the law as it stands now with regard to financial aid is that any convictions of any kind for drugs of any nature that occur before you are enrolled and obtain financial aid don't count. Any convictions that occur as a juvenile don't count. And that the process to be reinstated for financial aid has become increasingly simple. So that if I had a child who lost his or her financial aid because of a marijuana conviction, in order to have that aid reinstated, he would have to go to the financial aid office, get the name of a licensed or a registered provider of services, and essentially agree to take 2 unannounced drug tests. If both of those drug tests came clean, his financial aid would be reinstated. And there's information in my testimony about the law and that that's the provision. Because I sit on the board of the community college system, I asked their financial aid director about the provisions of these laws as they relate to the financial aid system at the community college. She graciously spoke with the admissions and staff, the dean of students at NHTI, and said that this financial aid provision at most affects 1 or 2 students a year, and that the effect is simply to get them into a place where they can pass, the drug test is passed and they move on. So I wanted to make sure that you had that information. The other thing that I wanted to follow up with is that the issue of cost of corrections and incarcerating people. I asked the person who works at the executive director of the New Hampshire Association of Counties to do, just when she met with her affiliate in the county houses of corrections, to do a one-time, when they met, how many people do you have in your county correctional facilities on that particular day whose only offense is a possession level offense? And the answer was 2. So the notion that people are being locked up en masse at the cost of $30,000 a year in county houses of corrections for possession offenses is simply incorrect. If you need additional information of that nature, I would be glad to try to get more detail for you.
Thank you very much.
So those are the gaps that I was trying to fill in.
Representative Ginsburg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think anybody disputes the facts you stated that are well known to us, that the use of marijuana for young and growing people can be very harmful. We've heard repeatedly from young people and law enforcement people that marijuana now is easier for a minor to get to acquire than either tobacco or alcohol, both of which we control. Is there any reason to believe that if we put marijuana under a similar sort of control, we would be able to reduce the use of marijuana by young people?
That's a really interesting question, because as I look at legalizing a substance like marijuana, I look back to the issue of what happens when you, as you look at legal substances now, tobacco and alcohol. And they are, because they're legal, they are widely marketed, widely advertised, generally focused on youth. So I am not a believer that legalizing this substance and, quote, putting it under control is going to make it any less attractive or any less accessible. And in fact, because the price will decline and the amount of the product that's available will also increase, I think you're going to have greater access.
Follow-up?
Would it help if we prohibited the advertising of marijuana?
I think if you get to a point with these bills that you put them into study, if that's what you may do, I think that there is an opportunity to have a really straight, very thoughtful discussion about drug policy in this state. But it's very hard to do that in this context. So if that's what you decide to do, I look forward to participating with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask her questions? Is she coming back to the next two bills? Or is this testimony on all three bills?
I think I'm hanging around because this is a lot of fun to be in this committee.
Well, I can't ask questions on this
No,
bill,
no.
like Representative Robertson, but I'll be here for the next two bills.
Sure.
Yes, Representative Bushin.
On your studies that you've done, are there any studies that show that there's a therapeutic value to incarcerating marijuana users?
I'm not aware of any, Representative Cushing. The only thing that I can tell you, having read some of the material on the other side of this issue, is that there's been an argument for many years as to whether treatment that is imposed, i.e. through incarceration or through a plea deal, that somehow that's less effective than voluntarily assumed treatment. And the answer to that question is very clear. Imposed treatment is as just effective as treatment that somebody voluntarily seeks.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to call David. I think it's controlled. C-R-U-T-O-R-D.
Crawford.
Crawford, I'm sorry.
Sorry.